Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're in my seed starting room yet again because I'm going to be getting some peppers started along with rosemary today. I also want to give you guys a seed starting update on the onions and also some of my cool weather crops. And I'm thinking I will also take you guys outside at the very end and show you the garlic that we planted in October. It's starting to get to that point where I will probably start feeding it pretty soon. This is typically the window where it starts to really grow. This year's been a little interesting because I planted out just a little bit later because I didn't want to have too much green growth going into the really cold of winter, and I think I timed it out really well this year. So there's a few things I'm playing around with the garlic this year, but I do want to give you guys an update on that as well, since we are talking like all things 2024 garden today. I have been getting so many questions when it comes to the garden lately and seed starting, and people just asking me what my zone is. So I just want to kind of mention that your zone really doesn't matter, guys. I made a video about this last year. Your zone really only matters when it comes to perennials. For instance, all of the zones kind of switched toward the end of 2023, and even though the zones really saw a change, I really didn't see a change when it came to my frost dates, which is when you are going to be timing a lot of your annuals. So keep that in mind if you're trying to figure out when you are doing your seed starting. So for instance, my last average frost where I'm at is typically the second week of April, but I typically won't plant out a lot of my warm weather crops like tomatoes or peppers till that first week of May, because even though our last expected frost is over, it's still a little cold. So things like tomatoes and peppers and those things that really thrive when it's really warm, I just want to kind of mention that I really don't like to plant those out until I'm seeing pretty much 50s and 60s as my lowest temperatures at night. So that includes peppers that we are starting today. Peppers are one of those things that I do get started quite early. I won't be getting tomatoes started for about another month or so at this point. But peppers take a little bit to germinate, and they're a little bit more slower growing. So that is one reason why we are going to go ahead and get them started. The varieties I am doing this year, I added a few new ones. We have our tried and true Hungarian Magyar, which this is the paprika variety that I dry. This makes such good paprika powder. This will be, I'm not sure if this is my 4th or 5th year growing this. I've really lost track of this. It's been in my garden pretty much about half the time I've grown a garden. So I love this pepper. It's a tried and true. I absolutely love it. A new one I'm really excited about though is this poblano. I'm very excited about trying poblanos. This is a brand new one for me. I really want to play around with like doing some stuffed poblanos and just kind of playing around with throwing them into recipes. I like hot food. So yeah, that's going to be a fun one this year. I have a classic jalapeno here. We have some classic bell peppers. I have a new variety of cayenne. I really wasn't like too excited about my cayenne variety last year. I've been playing around with different cayenne varieties. I've been trying to find one that's a little bit more high producing, and last year the variety I had was high producing, but I didn't like how thin the skin was. It was really hard to work with when I went to go de-seed it and throw those peppers into my freeze dryer. I like to de-seed the cayenne to where I can make cayenne powder, and then I won't de-seed the cayenne if I'm trying to make red chili flakes. So it's one of those things where I try to find a thicker walled cayenne, and I think this one might be it. We'll see. It's the Red Ember from Johnny's. It's a hybrid cayenne. And then this one I'm really excited about. So you know those little sweet peppers that come in a bag that are in a variety of like colors, the yellow, the orange, and the red, like the little bell pepper snacking peppers. So Johnny's this year, they have these ones, and this is just the lunchbox pepper mix, and this is going to be that. I love those snacking peppers, so I'm very, very excited about this. I have always had better luck with hot peppers versus sweet peppers for some reason. I had really good beginner's luck with sweet peppers, and I've been having some terrible luck when it comes to sweet peppers outside of paprikas. Last year I had a really good paprika year, but bell peppers have been a tricky one for me the last like handful of years. So I'm gonna play around with that a little bit more. And then we just have a banana pepper, another cayenne, and then also serranos. And then outside of peppers today, I will also be doing a few rosemary. I kind of have a list over here. I was trying to calculate it. I have 34, 35 spots laid out in my garden plans for peppers, and I think that's where I'm going to cap it, especially with adding a few more varieties this year. This year, I do need to plant a few more banana peppers. I didn't plant banana peppers at all last year because I had so many pickled banana peppers saved that I really didn't need to grow them. So that's one I'm re-adding in this year. That's the one thing I like about preserving. If you have a really good year, sometimes you can get ahead. And last year I had a really good paprika year. I'm really ahead on paprika. I think I'm actually going to go probably a year and a half with the supply I had. So I'm still going to plant out probably about 8 paprika plants though, because if I have that much extra again, I'll probably gift it out for Christmas and things like that. And then I have a handful of jalapenos, especially for salsa. Same with serranos. I'm going to plant out 2 serranos, 2 poblanos, a handful of bells. So it equals out to be about 34-ish peppers or so. So let me kind of show you though my garden plans at the moment. So I've been telling you guys I'm going to kind of break this down, but honestly my mind keeps changing, and it's to the point now where I think I'm very close and I'm starting to try to plan out my succession waves as far as when the garlic and the onions will come out of the garden and things like that. But this is kind of what things are currently looking like, and I have peppers all right over here. The one thing I'm really moving things around this year. I'm getting tomatoes out of the area they've been in for the last few years, circulating them into all kinds of areas. I'm really hoping that kind of mixing and matching and throwing things here and there will also kind of just help the resistibility of the plant. So I'm really mix matching a lot this year. I still have chunks of like onions and garlic just because I didn't want to have like those kind of all over the place and scattered. I just think it's easier to kind of deal with those all in one harvest. So for instance, let me kind of show you here. So for my second wave, I will have a few things open. I will have this garlic open, and I will have this stretch open where the onions are. So I'm kind of just trying to plan that second succession at the moment. I can typically get about 3 successions out of my garden space if I plan correctly. And the one thing I'm trying to plan for a little better is that second succession once the garlic and the onions come out. So the garlic will come out of the garden roughly the second week of June. At least that's how it's been the last 4 years I've grown garlic. Last year was actually a little bit earlier than that, but I can typically expect the second week of June to be when the garlic is harvested. And then last year the onions fell behind. I think the onions were about 3.5 weeks behind the garlic. I harvested, yeah, that would have been right, because I harvested the garlic the first week of June, and then the onions I harvested the first week of July. So at that point I have a lot of time left. I actually wrote down the days, because that's one thing that's really important, is just knowing how many days you truly have in your growing time. So for that second wave, I will actually have 120 to 130 days still in my growing season once that garlic is harvested. And I can pretty much plant anything at that point and expect to harvest in September or October. And then once the onions are harvested, I will still have about 100 to 92 days, which is still a long time to get a lot of things planted. So I think what I'm going to do is try to get a whole second succession of tomatoes planted out, either in that like first wave, once the garlic is harvested out. I think that will help just have tomatoes throughout the season, because typically those first wave of tomatoes tend to clonk out during like mid-August once we get some serious heat and they've been living their lives for a while. So just trying to plan those little things. I kind of wanted to mention that there's just so many little details and things to kind of mention, and things that just keep switching as I kind of plan accordingly. But I really like to have a visual, and having this just really helps. This is just an app called Procreate. I've mentioned this to you guys a few times, but if you have an iPad, this is really handy. I started off with just using a picture. So I had a cardboard. See, this is what I started off with like 3 or 4 years ago, and I used this for a few years, but I measured out my whole backyard and then I graphed it onto cardboard, and I printed out little graph squares and I kind of cut it all out, and you can see there's like so many garden beds missing and everything by the end, and I had to draw it in and whatnot. But having a visual really helped me be able to kind of really figure out exactly what I was able to fit into my garden. Yeah, that's kind of a little gist on that. That's a long little thing, but let's go ahead and show you guys all the ceilings I have going on at the moment. So here are all of the onions. Unfortunately, I didn't have all of the onions I wanted to germinate, but I still have right around about 130 to 140 onions here, and they are looking really good. I have fed these a few times, and I've also been cutting the tops every handful of days. I did mention to you guys I'd probably do it a few times. I forgot just how much onions grow. I also like to just do this with them, kind of strengthen their bases, but they're looking really good. These onions will be planted out the first week of March is what we're shooting for. I like to plant them 6 weeks before my last average frost. That's what I did last year, and they did really well. Yeah, so yeah, those will be out of the seed starting room pretty soon. These are the pots I will be using for peppers that I'll be filling up in just a little bit. And then here is our broccoli and some of our lettuce. Our broccoli all germinated really well. I need to go ahead and go through and thin these out. And then I also have some cabbage, some kale, some broccoli, and then I also have some lavender back here. And then we got some grass growing. That's step 2 grass. I have some over here too. I'm starting to get all of this back going. I ran out of seed and starting to get the fodder system back for the chickens. Let's go ahead and get some soil mix. The one thing I am doing different with peppers is using actual nursery pots. So up until this point, I have used all soil blocks, and that is one reason why I wanted to do this with you today, is because I've shown you the process with soil blocks a few times, and I want to show you the whole process when it comes to nursery pots. So when it comes to peppers, tomatoes, and a few other things, like tomatoes grow really fast, even though they're inside only for about 4 or 5 weeks, I will still use a big nursery pot like that because they do grow so fast. But then peppers, something that's been living, or something that's going to be living in my seed starting room for a handful of months, I really like to have these nursery pots because they can really grow into them, and I typically don't have to up pot from here. So very excited to show you guys this today. Also, when it comes to peppers, I have a heat mat already on and going. So peppers really like it warm when they are trying to germinate. So having a seed mat I find pretty handy when it comes to peppers, especially me. I start all of my seeds in my basement. It's a little bit cooler down here. It typically averages about like probably 63 to 65, I would say. I haven't temped it in a while, but that is kind of that. And one thing I've been doing this year is actually using humidity domes during that initial germination phase of the like handful of days while the seeds are just really soaking in that soil. And I've been really liking this. In previous years, I've told you guys I've just never really been a fan, but it's been really nice. It's been a little bit hands off in those first handful of days. Typically the soil doesn't dry up. I don't have to do anything. And the moment things germinate, I've just been pulling off the humidity dome. So like I had amazing germination when it came to my brassicas, and that's what I did. So I have been loving using humidity domes. That is something I will also be using today. So I'm going to be mixing up soil though the exact same way I mix up soil when I do soil blocks. So I have this big blue tub here, and I like to have this because it just really helps keep everything in, and if I have any extra soil that I'm going to be using in the next week, it will just help it stay moist. I really don't have to worry about it. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the soil I have up in here, and then I have another bag behind me. So when it comes to seed starting, all I use is organic potting mix, and then I like to throw like a handful of worm castings into the soil. I mix it up. I make sure it has a good consistency when it comes to moisture, and that is about it. Seed starting mixes are nice, but they don't have any nutrition, so you typically have to start feeding your plants more often. So when it comes to the onions, I mentioned I was feeding them. I've been using this fish and seaweed fertilizer for them. I will also be trying to use this quite often. I'm really excited about this. The onions have been responding really well to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these nursery pots filled, and then I'm going to walk you guys through the whole process of planting peppers. One thing I am going to be doing as well is sowing a handful of backups. So typically I will always have at least one extra of each seedling, and then that way if I have a really weak one or something, I can go ahead and not plant that out in the garden, and then I can be a little bit more choosy. It's also helpful just to have a backup in case you plant everything out and then something randomly happens to a plant. It's always nice to just have something ready to go. My first year doing a garden, I started from seed, which I had no idea what I was doing, but I got everything planted out, and we had a hailstorm and it completely totaled out my garden. So ever since that first year, I have always just sowed a handful more because I felt like I was so behind throughout the season that year. But it is one of those things that sometimes you just have a weather incident. But that is another point of like just having a succession plan, and then you have other plants ready to go in case something else were to happen or something doesn't go as planned. You could already have plants going that you can fill spaces with, and then you're just able to use your time a little bit more wisely. I think it's just really important, again, when you have a smaller space, to do the most you can with it. Establishing your garden is not the cheapest thing, so you really want to see the value in your space. And that's another reason I say grow what you eat. So when I was mentioning all the varieties and the amounts I'm growing, I really do try to think about what am I trying to preserve. So when it comes to the peppers, I do a lot of dried peppers for my pantry. So paprikas and cayennes are absolutely huge with that. I also love to powder down jalapenos and make jalapeno powder. Another thing I really enjoyed doing last year was freeze drying everything. So I would like to freeze dry a lot of sliced jalapenos. That way I could throw them, or diced jalapenos even, like green chilies, for instance. Just dice up a bunch of green chilies, just like canned green chilies, and be able to throw those into just chilies and soups and everything really easily. I love doing freeze-dried vegetables that way. But then I love to pickle peppers and stuff for pizzas and sandwiches and stuff like that. And I have tried to mess with fermented peppers and make hot sauce, and unfortunately I don't feel like I've really succeeded with that yet. But when it comes down to it, I am getting so many peppers out of my garden, and I'm able to use them for so many different things. So having a game plan going into your gardening year, I feel like is so important. I always advise, look at your kitchen. What are you using often? For me, that is onions, garlic, peppers. For instance, when it comes to just seasoning on a daily basis, I am literally picking up paprika powder, onion powder, and garlic powder almost on a daily. So also when it comes to dried herbs, oregano, basil, thyme, rosemary. I'm starting rosemary today. My rosemary died. Rosemary and lavender are perennials in our area, but sometimes our winters just get a little bit too cold where they knock them out, unfortunately. So that's where I feel like a greenhouse would be really handy. This year I left my white sage plant. I brought that inside because the white sage is not a perennial here. It's a perennial in, I think, zone 8 and 9. The white sage does not like any type of cold, so I brought that in. So when it comes to labeling the nursery pots, typically I like to label each and every nursery pot because I like to do a lot of bottom watering when it comes to my seedlings, and this allows me to be able to take out any nursery pot that looks like it needs to be able to be watered and just throw it in an area that I'm watering. And if there's one that doesn't need watered, I will just kind of let that be. So I personally like to label each one of my peppers and tomatoes, anything that's in a big nursery pot, especially when when things look the same, especially like peppers in the beginning. It's really easy to get them all mix match. So that is what I like to do. And I like to use painter's tape when I label everything because it comes off really easily off of the seedling trays or even these nursery pots. So my easiest way I have found is I like to just throw a few of these strips onto the table, and then that allows me just to write down however many I'm able to write. Oh, I don't think I have scissors. I need to go grab some scissors, but I'm gonna write down all of the different varieties. Banana, banana, banana. So for peppers, you're looking to plant them about 1/4 of an inch deep. And I will typically sow about 2 to 3 pepper seeds per pod here. And then I will go through and thin them out. I'm going to thin out my broccoli with you guys once I am done here. So let's go ahead and start with our bell peppers. But nothing too crazy here. I just have a variety called King of the North. And I personally like to go through and just set all of my seeds on top. And then that way I can just go through and push everything down all at once. So I am now jumping to banana peppers. Now popolanos. This might be the most varieties of peppers I have ever had in the garden at once. Got some serranos. This will be the last little bit of my serrano seeds. I think I've had these since 21, 22. Jump into cayenne. Last year I had some crappy luck when it came to my paprika germination. So that is another reason why I wanted to have a minimum of 1 extra of each. Some of these varieties I have roughly 2 extras. And then that way if I have somewhere I can put it, I'll put it somewhere. Or I'll give it away to a friend. I've already told a few people that, like, hey, I'll let you know if I have extras. Paprika. Last pepper I have is the classic jalapeno. And then rosemary, I believe it's pretty much surface level. Let's see. Yep, surface level. This is one of those seeds that requires light to germinate. So all you want to do is kind of press it into the soil. So I personally love having rosemary in the garden because I make a rosemary apple cider hair vinegar rinse, and I have missed having rosemary. Last year I didn't realize I didn't have any until it was too late. I didn't realize it was completely dead. Now I'm just going to give a little bit of a spritz and get everything up on the shelf. I had to adjust a few things just because these are really heavy and these only hold about 40 pounds and I don't want anything collapsing. So I just propped these up with some buckets, and all of my peppers are here in the humidity domes. All of my onions are here on the 2nd level, and then I have my cool weather crops and then my grass for my chickens and cats. minutes. All right, so I already thinned out my collards, cabbage, kale, and a few other things. I do need to get all this watered, but I do need to go ahead and thin out my broccoli and my lettuce today. So I'm just taking a little cotton pad and getting a little bit of alcohol on this. And I'm gonna just clean my pruners. And then I'm going to snip whatever one I want off. So some of these have 3, some of them have 2. I'm just going to snip off any of the extras. So I personally like to do snipping versus pulling, because when you pull, you're going to disturb that really fragile root system that really isn't established yet. So I personally think this is the way to go if you are going to thin out your seedlings. Of course, I heavily seeded my lettuce because last year I had really terrible germination with lettuce, and this year I had really amazing germination with lettuce. So for lettuce, I'm doing Paris Island romaine, and then I have another variety called the speckled trout, I believe. Broccoli, I did the Bell Star again. That was what I did last year, and it performed really well for me. It's supposed to be a little bit more stress resistant, which it did do really well in our temperature swings. So I wanted to go ahead and give that another try this year. And then I have some red cabbage. I have a purple kale, collard greens, lavender, and I think that's it. The reason why I love lining my trays with these mesh trays is for bottom watering. It allows me to water soil blocks or nursery pots, and it allows the water to seep through to where things aren't soaking, and soil blocks and whatnot also don't deteriorate much. I will say, like the onions, by the time they go outside, there's a few that end up crumbling a little bit, but for the most part, all I do is pour water into these trays just a little bit, and they will pretty much handle themselves. I don't overwater anything. I allow these to kind of allow the water to settle, and I see where the water line is. You don't really want it to be setting. Some of these have onion roots that already go into the mesh tray, so you really don't want anything sitting above, but if the soil's able to get wet, it's able to soak things in. And after about like 20-30 minutes, you'll see like the coloration in the soil blocks really change. Do we miss the garden space or what, guys? So here is all of our garlic. We have garlic in this bed, and also half of this bed. So I have chestnut red here, I have Georgian fire here, I have Italian purple, and then a little bit more chestnut over here. So you can see it is really starting to pop through. We're definitely at a good 6 inches, and it is time to start fertilizing this stuff. I think the soft neck might be even taller, but I do need to go through and weed a little bit too. Garlic really does not like to have friends beside it. I am seeing more and more weeds popping up as I'm sitting around here, but this is something I'm going to be tackling probably over the next week. It is time to go ahead and feed the garlic. The garlic likes to be fed once it starts to hit about this 6-inch mark. And the greens represent your papery layers. So the more greens and leaves you have for your garlic, the more papery layers you have. So you achieve this by hitting it with a nitrogen source. I've always hit it with some blood meal and worm castings in the beginning, and then toward the end, once it hits about 1 foot tall, you're going to start switching to phosphorus. You want to have a lot more bulb development, and that really helps play the part in that. And then the moment you start to see scapes appear, you typically want to back off any fertilizing at that point and let the plant just kind of do its thing. So you do a lot more fertilizing in the front half of garlic than you do the back half of garlic. So I kind of just wanted to mention that because I have been getting quite a few questions when it comes to garlic lately, and I just wanted to kind of touch on that here at the end of the video and kind of give you guys what I do. I was reading up a little bit more on Mad River Garlic Growers website because that's who I order seed garlic from, and they even were mentioning the seaweed and kelp fertilizer I've been using for the onions inside to also use that. So I'm just debating really what exactly I want to throw on this first. I might do that just because it's an all-around, all-purpose. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of all the garlic at the moment, but I wanted to show you guys this because the garlic really starts to just keep going at this point, and it doesn't stay this small for that long. But I hope you guys enjoy just hanging out with me as I did different seed starting things in the seed room, and I just wanted to show you guys a little bit of the garden here in mid-February. Honestly, we are in our final few weeks of the calm before the storm. Once March hits here, we start planting stuff out in the garden. We have a lot more seed starting, and really the games are just beginning. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with me today, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.